what I like you to be from a publicity perspective is congruent with your message. That's your publicity message. So what does that mean? I'm a big believer, and I have people take their publicity message from offline to online. And that tends to work. It creates that congruency and consistency, and it helps your social selling.
Welcome to the Making Sales Social podcast, featuring the top voices in sales, marketing, and business. Join Bryn Tillman and me, Bob Woods, as we each bring you the best tips and strategies our guests are teaching their clients, so you can leverage them for your own virtual and social selling. This episode of the Making Sales Social podcast is brought to you by Social Sales Link, the company that helps you start more trust-based conversations without being salesy through the power of LinkedIn and AI. Start your journey for free by joining our resource library at socialsaleslink.com/library. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Jill Lublin. Jill is a master publicity strategist, consultant, speaker, and a 4-time best-selling author. She's the go-to person for building success through influence marketing, networking, and publicity. Jill's a real media magnet, and with more than 25 years of experience, she's been pulling in media attention for a long time now. She's made thousands of stage appearances alongside celebrities such as Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Barbara Corcoran, just to name a few. She's worked with more than 100,000 clients, implementing her signature formula for getting media attention and creating next-level visibility in the marketplace, which of course results in boosted sales. And that's something that we all want. So those lead and profit generating formulas are included in her signature program, which is called the Publicity Breakthrough Bootcamp, as well as in her monthly kindness circles. So let's get right into it. Jill Lublin, welcome to Making Sales Social.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I am glad to be here.
Great. So our first traditional question for everyone who comes on the podcast is, what does making sales social mean to you?
You know, the truth is sales, as of course you know as an expert, are social no matter where you are. So when we're talking about social media, what I like you to be, from a publicity perspective, is congruent with your message. That's your publicity message. So what does that mean? I'm a big believer, and I have people take their publicity message from, offline to online. And that tends to work. It creates that congruency and consistency, and it helps your social selling.
Absolutely. That is all that we are about here is getting things started online, proving that you're an expert through the content that you share, as well as through comments that you leave, especially on LinkedIn, because that's what we primarily concentrate on, with the ultimate goal to at least get that conversation started and see if there's a possibility of either a direct sale or maybe a partnership or no, not yet, not now, but let's keep in touch. And then we've had sales just here personally, a Social Sales Link, that have taken a couple of years to close. But that's because they didn't need it then, but they need it now. So I mean, people do need to be aware of that.
They have their own rhythm, but part of it is being consistent and persistent, right?
Yep. Yeah, 100%, which actually gets into our next question. So in your LinkedIn profile, and yeah, I do check these things, as you could imagine, you have the tagline, "Find your voice, be heard by millions, change the world." Now, I find that intriguing, especially with what we were just talking about. What exactly does that mean to you?
So the thing about publicity is it is about creating a contribution, an impact. And when you find your voice, you can get seen, heard, and paid. The other piece of that, of course, is a lovely publicity thing to remember, right? And so I think it's really important that you do create memorability. Find your voice, be heard by millions, right? This is something that I think many people want, at least thousands, I hope, and meaning to be
Definitely.
heard. the truth is, the more that you're heard, the more that your voice from a publicity's perspective, whether it's in social, on podcasts and blogs, in your local newspapers, in radio, TV, all of it matters and all of it counts. So I want you to be heard a lot. I'll tell you an interesting story, Bob. I actually got hired by Mark Victor Hansen. You might have heard of him, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah.
And he had me strategize publicity with him 1 year before a book was about coming out, right? 1 year before. Why? He said to me, Jill, you are here in this room today because when we wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, particularly in the beginning, we did every little thing that we could be heard, seen, and listened to. This is what we're talking about. And he kept saying yes to everything because everything matters and everything counts. So he understood and still understands the power and value of publicity. And I think that's really what we're talking about here, is impacting and contributing to as many people as you can. That's what publicity does.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's really cool, because one of the things that I talk about when it comes to, more along the lines of sharing content and commenting and things like that is pinging on people's radars, so that the more radar pings that you get, the more top of mind that you are. It's almost like publicity, and it sounds like what you do is like another layer on that, and people are potentially getting even more radar pings in areas other than like direct social, at least. Would that be would that be a good way to put it?
That's exactly a great way to put it. I mean, the reality is, if you're featured in your local business journal, it's going to direct people to wherever you want to direct them to. If you want to direct them to your social, then do that. You want to direct them to your website, then do that. The point is, you got to direct them somewhere, right? And I do.
Yep.
That's actually important. Please always direct people somewhere. That's a key, always.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that when everybody out there hears public relations, they all have ideas about what they are, what public relations is, whether it's true or not. As a former journalist, as longtime listeners of this podcast know, I'm a former broadcast journalist. I know I do, and I actually like working with PR people for the most part. There are sometimes, but for the most part, it was always a really good relationship I had with them. I'd like to hear your definition of what public relations actually is, and especially how it can help those who don't think of it as something they can use to help themselves, both just in sales, just in selling, but in growing the business in a larger aspect as well.
So in my definition, public relations happens from the minute you walk out your door. And I mean into a Zoom room with a meeting. I mean, out for coffee. I mean, on the airplanes. The reality is you're always doing public relations, my friends, whether you know it or not. So the first thing is, be clear about who you are and your message, and understand that you are representing yourself. Yes, relating to your public relations all the time. So I believe it's happening constantly. And then there's the intentional piece of public relations, which is getting featured in specific, publications, getting featured locally, which I'm a big believer in. Having a focus for where you want to be, and knowing what your message is. The reality is, public relations is driving, and I promise you, going to drive your prospects, your referrals, your reputation, your trustability, your other people's, let me say, belief in who you are. And what's super amazing about it? It really drives you to the front of the bus. What does that mean? When you're featured, people are going to know your name, that credibility factor, that visibility factor, and it up-levels you beyond anyone else in your industry. And I'll give you a great example of this. A woman who was recently in my Media Mastery Intensive, followed my system, and I believe in systems for public relations. Well, guess what? She got in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. She got one line, okay? Everything matters. Remember that. Everything matters. Yep. She walked into a position interview that she was having, and the gentleman had Googled her. He said, listen, I Googled you. She was up against two other people, so there are three total. He said, you got the job. And that was a $35,000 job for consulting and coaching. He said, I looked you up and I saw you in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. You must be good. Do you see the assumption there? She
Yep.
didn't even have a big article. And because she was in front of the bus, because she had name recognition, because people will Google you and find out where you've been, who's been talking about you, where you've been seen and heard, it has an inherent credibility that escalates and elevates you. And I like to say that publicity is the gift that keeps on giving, because the reality is you can use it again, and again, consistently for many, many years. So it has a braggability factor that's actually really important in your business.
Yeah, exactly. And you touched on something there that gets into my next question, and that has to do with credibility, because we all can be out there on social and kind of brag about ourselves. And although you shouldn't be bragging about yourselves, you should be sharing, really quality content that helps educate and everything else, and building yourself up as an expert. It seems to me that when you get the publicity through the channels that you're talking about, that credibility is coming from another source that that you don't directly have anything to do with. It's actually someone else who's kind of calling you an expert because you're being quoted in this article, and on TV or whatever, or in a podcast. Because I think the word expert gets tossed around way too much nowadays. And I always go by what my wife told me years ago on the subject, which is you should let other people call you an expert. So, what is your definition of an expert, where that credibility comes from? And you've kind of gotten into this a little bit already, but how can people use this in their self-marketing for PR?
Okay, so I beg to differ with you for just a moment, and that
No,
is,
please do.
I actually think you really ought to, shall I say, claim that being an expert. And yes, do many people call themselves an expert? Well, maybe and maybe not, because here's the reality. Those who are experts do get interviewed, period. I mean, look at you turn any channel, who do you think they're interviewing? Experts, absolutely. People in their fields, people who are recognized, people who maybe the producer Googled and found that there's somebody who, yes, is an expert. So I'm really big on claim it, because experts get interviewed. So from my perspective, from a publicity perspective, and yeah, you better have the message to back it up, the ability to communicate simply, which is learned. Do not be concerned. You can practice, you can perfect it, you can pitch it. And the reality is that that a clear message does lead to you being the expert picked. So I do think it's important, because experts are featured, period. So tell me the second half of that question again, if you would, please.
So how can people actually use that more? So, so in your mind, embrace expert, call yourself an expert. What is the next step from there, I guess, is the easiest way to put it.
So, okay, knowing that experts get the gig, meaning they're featured in publicity, right?
Sure.
And that's why I'm saying, hey, jump up and down and yes, declare yourself an expert with an appropriate, credible message. And then frankly, you go out and you pitch, meaning to the media specifically. You write an article that's really good and get featured on, like, medium.com is a really great resource for that, where you can get your articles featured. So I'm a big believer, have one good article ready to go just in case, because sometimes the media loves to read your article. What did you say about this? And that actually is a really good thing. So I just want to put that out there.
Sure.
As far as I'm concerned, part of this is, well, honestly, a bit of a mindset thing, meaning I'm an expert, I'm good enough, because listen, I've had one person business, solopreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs. I work a lot with entrepreneurs and small business owners. These are not big companies. And why they're ahead of the game is because publicity has become a big part of their strategy that they use consistently, where, somebody else might be heads down, grindstone, kicking it away. But that person who got that, $34,000 consulting job, who is a consultant, one person, by the way, doesn't have any team members. Publicity is what did that. So I think one feeds the other very beautifully. And the power of when you've got a meeting with a client to sell to them, to promote your services, and you say, hey, listen, I was recently featured in the, fill in the blank, or, this podcast. And then it becomes a tab in your website, which says, the media is raving about Bob Woods, and has the different places that you've been featured. It speaks for itself. You hardly have to open your mouth, and people already know you're credible.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And I can't wait to tell my wife what you just told me. You might have started an argument there. I'm not sure. No, I'm kidding. She'll be great about it. But I think that everything that you've said leads excellently in my next question, and that has to do with media scripts, because it sounds to me like you had talked about messaging before and how important that is, and you can even practice these. It sounds to me like all of that comes from media scripts. So what specifically is a media script, and how does someone who isn't media savvy like yourself create one for themselves, or at least start thinking about creating one for themselves, and start thinking about especially what should be in there and what shouldn't be in there?
Great. So, first of all, I'm glad in a way that you called it a script, because the truth is you need a script. You do. I want you to feel confident, meaning to go out there when you're talking to both your prospects, and when you're networking, and when you're talking to the media, which my media scripts work for all three cases: networking, prospecting, clients, and media. That's four places it works in, because it's, again, a consistency factor. So also what I notice in people I worked with for many, over the many years, is that when you have a script, which I, again, call a message, what's super great about that is you're confident. And what I've noticed is confidence levels go way up when you know what to say. So do not fear that you're going to sound too scripted, because of course it will become more natural. And, yes, you're going to practice a little bit, but stop. I just want to say, don't think about this, just do it. So here's your formula. And this is the formula for a media message that really works. Let's fill in this first line. The problem today is, what is that? I didn't ask you what you do. No. I said, what's the problem out there? So, I have a healthcare practitioner, and she says the problem today is, people are more sick than they've ever been, which is true, by the way. I actually just read an article on that. And then I called her up and I said, hey, there was recently an article that just appeared, XXX. You're the expert. This is your message. Do you see how we start putting things together, right? So what's the problem out there? And then I want you to give 3 solutions. What does that mean? Tell people what to do. Do it in 5-year-old language. That's key. And give them simple strategies. And here's the fun part. Appetizers, not full meals. So please don't give all of your secrets away. We want people to work with you. Yes, and give golden nuggets, always be of value and benefit, right? And give them simple things that they can actually do. Like, you don't say, well, hire me as your coach. You might say, work with a sales strategist to help you refine your message. Great. That could be one piece. So I think that's really important, that you find, we'll call them easy ways to translate your message. And then in my system, which I believe in systems for publicity, you're going to look at your message every 30 days. Make sure that it's congruent with you, that it says what you want it to say, that it's who you are, and that you can say it well. And don't keep changing it, please. I just want you to look at it every 30 days and make sure that it's the right message for what you're talking about, what you're promoting, and where you're focused on.
Yes. So your very last point is interesting, because that just popped up in my mind a little bit. What if you feel like you have more than one message? Should you just go out with just one message, or have like a couple different things for different messaging, or how do you feel about that?
Probably separate them. However, in your bio, you could say as a, sales strategist, also, or, the thing that I have people do that's a really good phrase is when you're talking with someone, not necessarily the media, by the way, with the media, I want you to be consistent on one message, but in your bio
Right.
and in larger documents, you can talk about and also, but one thing that you could do, like for instance, I writing the book, The Profit of Kindness, I said, did you know that I also run a kindness circle every single month where you can network with other great people and promote your products? So yay,
Yeah.
that's different than my publicity and media mastery intensives and the book Guerrilla Publicity. But it becomes a, did you know that I also, and it's also in my bio and it's also in other places.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So now let's talk about taking that message and giving it what you call the ooh ah factor. So back when I was in broadcast journalism, writing scripts for air and things like that, we had scripts. Sometimes we would look at a script and go, "Oh, that's a meow," and other times we would go, "Oh, that's a Meg." So meow stood for my eyes open wide, and Meg's was my eyes grow sleepy. So it sounds like what you're talking about is definitely meow type of material. So what is that, and how can we use that, especially with everything you just shared about the message?
Wonderful, thank you. So, and I love those acronyms, by the way. I think that's really fun. The truth is you've got to get eyes wide open, right? And the reality is it can be done in different ways. Sometimes it may be exactly what your business is about, but here's the truth. Often it isn't. Often you will get into the media because of a side door, a back door, top door. Honestly, get into the media whatever way you can, because once you do, you control the message. Okay, you control the message. So what the ooh ah factor is about is using everything you've got. And so I've had, for instance, I have a business communications client. We're doing great and getting great stories about how to communicate effectively in business. And then when Black History Month comes, because she's a Black woman, we do a story about how to communicate powerfully as a Black woman in today's time. It's a slightly different story.
Yep.
She's in Black enterprise because of it, using her everything she's got. So this is what I really want you to think about and be with today. Like, how could you use different parts of who you are? A different woman I work with, she's a Christian woman who does voice and helps people show up better that way. So guess what? Not only are we doing business stories because of using your voice in business and getting into business journals across the world, but also because because she's a Christian woman, we're getting into Christian media, women's media, and Christian women's media. That just effectively increased our publicity odds by 3 times because we added in 3 different markets. Those are some of the obvious things I want all of you to look at that some people really never even touch. And it's just super great that will help you get more media quickly using your own story, whether it's vulnerable parts or happy parts, and start looking at other ways you can get into media that touch on something interesting. Like, here's another one, my dating strategist. She spent a full day on Fox News on Zoom, by the way. This is what's so great about media now. You can be on Zoom.
Yeah.
And what was she talking about? Can a Democrat date a Republican, and can a Republican date a Democrat? Turns out, by the way, they can, depends on communication.
Yeah.
But that's my whole point. A whole day, she never would have thought about that angle had we not been talking about use everything you've got. And that means what's happening in the news that you can fit into also.
Yeah, hang it on that peg, like we always used to say. Definitely find a topical peg for your message if you can. And that obviously that can't happen all the time. But I think that if you really think about it, it can happen more often than you probably think it can.
Yeah. Yeah. And just really listen, check your headlines every day on your phone. Just see what's happening and where can you fit in. That's the key.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's fantastic. So there are some people out there who I would call sticks in the mud, but whatever. They want to put an ROI or return on investment number on, anything and everything that's done in the business, including intangibles. And I think that PR probably fits a little bit more into intangibles, although you may argue with that. So what do you think the ROI is on publicity, and how can a business measure it if it can be measured at all?
Well, let me tell you, the power of the intangible measure of publicity is actually sky high. You know why?
Hmm.
Again, I'm going to go to, I'll call it braggability factor. Please take that lightly. But what I mean is, as a company, to be able to show that you've been seen and heard. I mean, really, what's the first thing you see on social? I don't know if you've noticed, featured in,
Yep. I've
with
seen
me in Forbes and Inc. and Fox and Entrepreneur. You bet it's all over my social media,
Yep.
because that does create credibility. So that is very tangible. And the ROI on this, and how we in the publicity business measure ROI, is if you had paid for that piece of publicity, how much would you have paid for it if it were advertising? That's how you actually measure it. So, for instance, I had a woman, she was on NBC Nightly News, by the way, using everything she's got, completely unrelated. Uh,
Hmm.
Guess what? It was a 4-minute spot, 4 minutes on NBC Nightly News. It would have cost her $720,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's ROI. She didn't pay
Yep.
for it, completely free. That's exciting. So that's how we measure it. If you get, a quarter of an inch in a newspaper, find out how much that would have cost for advertising. You're going to find out that advertising actually costs a lot. Publicity
Mhm.
is free, and that's the ROI. Plus, and I'm going to include major bonus, the expertise escalation and elevation, because you've been featured.
Yep. So all you people who are always concerned about ROI, you now got something to hang your hat on there. And I think that that's a great way to look at it. Plus, there are going to be intangibles that you just can't measure, but you actually can put an ROI number on that, which I think is fantastic, especially if you determine that a deal gets closed because of something that they read directly in there, which is why you should always ask people, if you don't already know, how they found you, or whatever, too, because then you can track it even better.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep, absolutely. So, Jill, I love those one thing you can do right now kind of takeaways and tips. So what's one actionable tip someone can do right now to start getting the media attention that they want?
Beautiful. I go to nationaldaycalendar.com. I'd look up a holiday, a significant time that completely aligns with who you are or what you do, or might be related to who you are, like my business consultant who has a son who's autistic. And he goes out for National Autism Day, National Autism Month, talking about, how do you be a dad? How do you be a parent and stay in business and take care of your children? Interesting story, right? So I
Mhm.
do something like that. I think that's a really good first step that will open up a whole new world that maybe you never thought of before, and get you started with excitement.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. And we're actually going to have that link in the show notes to nationaldaycalendar.com. That's all one word, nothing funky going on with the URL or anything like that. So that is fantastic stuff, Jill. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, or if you got something going on that you want to flag our listeners too, why don't you go ahead and talk about those real quick?
Sure. So I have a wonderful free gift for you. It's an action guide loaded with more great publicity tips. I'd love to share that with you. And super good news is I've created a free publicity masterclass. You come in, it's live with me, and I'll answer your questions, and it's all part of this gift. And both are completely free. And what you do is you go to publicitycrashcourse.com/free gift.
Very good. And again, that will also be in show notes along with Jill's main website, which is Jill Lublin, Lublin.com, and as well as her LinkedIn, in case you want to find out a little bit more about her on there, because we, of course, love LinkedIn here. So with that, Media Magnet and Publicity Sherpa, Jill Lublin, thank you so much for joining us on Making Sales Social today. Glad to have you on.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. And thank you for streaming this episode of Making Sales Social. So remember, when you're out and about this week and any week, be sure to make your sales social. Don't miss an episode. Visit socialsaleslink.com/podcast. Leave a review down below. Tell us what you think, what you learned, and what you want to hear from us next. Register for free resources at linkedinlibrary.com. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. Visit our website, socialsaleslink.com, for more information.